Star Trek vs. Star Wars, The Imperial War by Darius Trent. Chapter 8. The Battle of Sol. Engagement 4. Battle of Sol. United Federation of Planets Galactic Empire Class, Galaxy Venture Refit. Ships present, 25 known ships, USS Arizona, USS Venture, USS Galaxy, USS Sydney. Maximum combat speed. Warp 9.9 armament, 1214 Type 10 phaser banks, 2 torpedo launchers, 250 photon torpedoes, 50 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs. Forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft. 8 shuttlecraft, 1 Danube-class runabout. Class. Imperial 1 ships present, 450 known ships. ISD Chimera. Maximum combat speed. MGLT 60 armament, 75 turbolaser cannons, turret-based, 60 ion cannons. Weapons layout. Forward, starboard, port, dorsal auxiliary craft, 72 TIE fighters, 8 Lambda-class shuttles, 15 troop transports. Class. Galaxy X ships present, 1 known ships, USS Olympus. Maximum combat speed. Warp 9.98 armament, 2 phaser cannons, 15 Type 12 phaser banks, 1 Type 20 spinal lance phaser, 7 torpedo launchers, 200 photon torpedoes, 200 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs. Forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft. 4 shuttlecraft, 12 Peregrine-class fighters, 8 Danube-class runabouts. Class. Interdictor ships present, 48 known ships. Maximum combat speed. 975 kph armament, 4 gravity well projectors, 20 turbolasers. Weapons firing arcs. Forward, starboard, port, dorsal. Auxiliary craft. 24 TIE fighters class. Excelsior refit. Ships present. 47 known ships. USS Okinawa maximum combat speed, warp 9.4. Armament. 16 Type 810 Type 10 phaser banks, 6 torpedo launchers, 6030 photon torpedoes, 6090 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs. Forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft. 6 shuttlecraft, 6 shuttlepods class. Executor. Ships present. 1 known ships. SSD Executor maximum combat speed, 40 mglt. Armament. 4000 turbolasers, weapons firing arcs. Forward, starboard, port, dorsal. Auxiliary craft. 855 TIE fighters class. Intrepid. Ships present. 10 known ships. USS Destiny, USS Voyager. Maximum combat speed. Warp 9.975 armament. 13 Type 10 phaser banks, 4 torpedo launchers, 55 photon torpedoes, 40 quantum torpedoes, 5 tricobalt devices. USS Voyager possesses an additional 50 transphasic torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs. Forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft. 7 shuttlecraft, 2 shuttlepods, 1 Delta-class runabout. Class. DS-1 ships present, 1 known ships, Death Star. Maximum combat speed. 10 mglt armament, 10,000 turbolasers, 1 mki superlaser. Weapons firing arcs. Forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft. 7,000 TIE fighters, class, Sovereign. Ships present. 5 known ships, USS Enterprise, USS Davis. Maximum combat speed. Warp 9.985 armament, 14 Type 12 phaser banks, 5 torpedo launchers, 250 photon torpedoes, 250 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs. Forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft. 10 shuttlecraft, 4 Danube-class runabouts. Class. Luna ships present. 2 known ships. USS Titan. Maximum combat speed. Warp 9.975 armament, 13 Type 10 phaser banks, 4 torpedo launchers, 50 photon torpedoes, 100 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 5 shuttlecraft, 1 shuttlepod class, Prometheus. Ships present: 1 known ships, USS Prometheus. Maximum combat speed, warp 9.985. Armament: 14 Type 12 phaser banks, 3 torpedo launchers, 200 photon torpedoes, 200 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 5 shuttlecraft, 1 shuttlepod class, Sabre. Ships present: 24 known ships, USS Jaeger, USS Peterson. Maximum combat speed, warp 9.8. Armament: 3 Type 10 phaser banks, 2 torpedo launchers, 30 photon torpedoes, 30 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 5 shuttlecraft, 1 shuttlepod class, Miranda. Ships present: 32 known ships, USS Hotspur, USS Nautilus, USS Zurich. Maximum combat speed, warp 9. Armament: 10 Type 8 phaser banks, 4 torpedo launchers, 30 photon torpedoes, 30 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 4 shuttlecraft, 1 shuttlepod. Class: Steamrunner. Ships present: 50 known ships, USS Amsterdam, USS Steamrunner. Maximum combat speed, warp 9.7. Armament: 11 Type 10 phaser banks, 4 torpedo launchers, 45 photon torpedoes, 45 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 7 shuttlecraft, 3 shuttlepods. Class: Akira. Ships present: 50 known ships, USS Galway. Maximum combat speed, warp 9.8. Armament: 6 Type 10 phaser banks, 15 torpedo launchers, 200 photon torpedoes, 175 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 10 shuttlecraft, 5 shuttle pods, 40 peregrine fighters. Class: Nebula. Ships present: 25 known ships, USS Bonchun. Maximum combat speed, warp 9.6. Armament: 11 Type 10 phaser banks, 7 torpedo launchers, 250 photon torpedoes, 50 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 10 shuttlecraft, 12 shuttle pods, 1 Danube-class runabout. Class: Vesta. Ships present: 3 known ships, USS Aventine. Maximum combat speed, quantum slipstream, equivalent warp 9.999973598355618. Armament: 9 Type 12 phaser banks, 2 pulse phaser cannons, 3 torpedo launchers, 175 photon torpedoes, 200 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 6 shuttlecraft, 4 shuttle pods. Class: Defiant. Ships present: 25 known ships, USS Avenger. Maximum combat speed, warp 9.6. Armament: 4 pulse phaser cannons, 2 Type 10 phaser banks, 4 torpedo launchers, 36 photon torpedoes, 60 quantum torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 1 shuttlecraft, 2 shuttlepods. Class: Crossfield. Ships present: 1 known ships, USS Discovery. Maximum combat speed, warp 8. Armament: 10 Type 10 phaser banks, 4 torpedo launchers, 50 photon torpedoes, 30 quantum torpedoes, 20 transphasic torpedoes. Weapons firing arcs: forward, aft, starboard, port, dorsal, ventral. Auxiliary craft: 10 shuttlecraft. In space, nearly 500 star destroyers of mainly Imperial 1 class sat in space slowly moving forward. This fleet opposed about 300 Federation vessels, all of assorted classes with the most common being the Akira and Steamrunner classes. The Galaxy-class ships lead smaller groups of about 12 assorted ships, in a formation known as Galaxy Wings, and the Sovereign-class ships had command over these. 5 Galaxy Wings moved to engage the Imperial forces. These ships, led by the USS Sydney, fired several phaser beams at the domes of the Imperial ships on the front lines, before a huge volley of photon and quantum torpedoes came hurling out at the Star Destroyers. The Star Destroyers, still out of range of the ships, were helpless as the torpedoes and phasers pounded into their hulls, some even exploding from hits to the reactor or the command tower as some of their counterparts attempted retaliation, the turbolaser bolts from the vessels losing power and the majority of them missing their targets. The ships attacking then suddenly went to warp until they were directly next to the Imperial ships, which had little time to react before the ships poured out a barrage of phasers and torpedoes, destroying several Star Destroyers. The Star Destroyers were able to fight back though, as thousands of turbolaser bolts were hurled towards the ships, 2 Miranda classes and an Excelsior class failing to warp away from the barrage and exploding. The remaining ships went to warp again, repeating the cycle of attack and withdraw as they continually weakened the Imperial front lines. While this was happening, 50 Star Destroyers, accompanied by 15 interdictors, broke formation and went to attack the shipyards. Most were cut down by the main fleet's barrage of torpedo fire, but roughly 20 managed to break through to the shipyards, although some were very badly damaged. With a quickened haste, the USS Voyager, the USS Davis and the Davis's attack group broke the line in order to defend the shipyards. The Voyager, armed with transphasic torpedoes, fired on the fleet, 1 torpedo being enough to destroy an entire ship. The Star Destroyers were quickly dispatched by the small group of ships, but not without inflicting casualties, as 4 Sabre classes, 3 Excelsiors and a Miranda ended up being destroyed in the ensuing return of fire. The ships now nothing but debris floating in space. The USS Olympus then fired its Lance phaser, cutting straight through several interdictor-class vessels until it reached its intended target, the Executor. Although having to go through at least 5 ships, the beams still managed to reach the Executor, thanks to a cutting beam mode recently installed on the ship. The ship's shields managed to bear the brunt of the force as it started to launch TIE fighters after the ships attacking the front lines. The TIE fighters began attacking the Federation ships at the front lines, their unconcentrated fire doing little against the Federation shields. While they weren't necessarily damaging the ships, they were proving to be a distraction, causing several ships to instead target them. Without shields, the TIEs were helpless as they were vaporized on the spot, their previous mass now nothing but energy as the battle raged on. Their sacrifice, though, allowed the Star Destroyers to begin pushing back against the Federation forces. They started to concentrate their fire on the Galaxy-class ships, and ships such as the Sydney started to take heavy damage to their shields. Smaller ships, attempting to defend these, began to lash out as well, the Defiant classes especially destroying several ships before falling back to Federation lines to regroup and coordinate with the rest of the ships. In total, 50 Star Destroyers were lost on the Imperial side, whereas a Galaxy, 4 Nebulas, 10 Excelsiors, 3 Steamrunners and 4 Mirandas were lost to the Federation. While falling back to the Federation lines, the interdictor-class vessels began to power on their powerful interdiction fields, their combined power enough to prevent any ship from entering hyperspace in the area. While they thought this would have an effect on the Federation's maneuverability, it did little to slow them down, as the distance between the two forces was still a steady 200 kilometers as the Federation torpedoed the Imperial fleet from afar. With this, a total of 100 Imperial ships went to engage the Federation lines in an attempt on the shipyards. The Federation wasted no time, bringing down dozens Star Destroyers before they were in weapons range. It was then the Star Destroyers' turn at firing, as they responded with thousands of turbolaser bolts hurled towards the Federation fleet. While most ships were able to avoid being hit, some were caught off guard, the USS Aventine especially taking dozens of hits as it hid behind the USS Arizona. The Arizona defended the Aventine from further attack, firing at any ships attempting to destroy it. Through all this commotion, the USS Discovery had been busy quietly charging up its spore drive. The saucer section's rings had been spinning in their usual manner, consuming the excess energy generated from using the spore drive. And with a spin on its spinal axis, the ship disappeared in a flurry of blue cracks and floating spores, only to reappear next to the Executor. It then proceeded to fire a single transphasic torpedo at the nose of the vessel, the advanced torpedo phasing past the superstar destroyer's shields as it impacted on the hull, the resulting explosion taking out a full 8 kilometers out of the Executor's length. Before any ships could respond, the Discovery jumped back to its original position, from which it continued to fight the Imperials as the Galway, Avenger and Peterson moved in to defend the Crossfield-class vessel. It was then that the Verteron array on Mars began to rain hell on the Imperial attack. The array itself, long since upgraded since the days of the United Earth, had multiple firing points now, and each one of them focused on a different star destroyer. The beams of extremely accelerated Verteron particles slammed into the star destroyers, the sheer force ripping away the shield domes before tearing the hull plating away like tissue paper. The star destroyers now nothing but empty frames floating in space as the Federation fleet pushed back against the Empire. On the Arizona, the crew were pushing hard to defend the Aventine and the Discovery. With the loss of the USS Zurich and the USS Amsterdam from the Arizona's wing of ships, it was now spreading its forces out more thinly to combat all the threats present, sending the Galway, Avenger and Peterson to defend the Discovery, the Steamrunner, Prometheus and Okinawa to engage the attacking Imperial ships, and the Destiny was helping it defend the Aventine as the Vesta-class ship attempted repairs to its shield emitters. On the bridge of the Arizona, Captain Trent steadied himself as the ship was hit by a round of turbolasers, most passing through the superstructure of the Galaxy-class ship as the Arizona responded in kind with a full spread of quantum torpedoes at a star destroyer's exposed reactor dome. The dome exploded, bringing down the ship in a ball of flames and sending its crew to a likely death by either burning or asphyxiation in space. "The Aventine is hailing us, sir," reported Taytoner as the Arizona lurched to evade the wreckage of a Steamrunner-class ship, the remains appearing on the viewscreen for a fleeting moment. Audio only. "Patch it through," ordered Aldrin. "This is Lieutenant Commander Dax of the Aventine," came through the speakers. "Our shields are back online." "Excellent work, Commander Dax," complimented Trent. "My condolences for the loss of your captain and first officer." "Don't worry about them, Captain," replied Dax. "Let's just make sure their deaths weren't in vain." The Aventine wasted no time in getting back to the situation at hand, firing several rounds of phaser cannons and quantum torpedoes at a star destroyer's shield generators, the domes exploding under the phaser cannon fire as the torpedoes made short work of the rest of the command tower. The Aventine moved on to join the Arizona as it started to push back the Imperial fleet, the ships attacking the main Federation fleet now reduced to only 35 vessels. At this point, the Imperial ships attacking the Federation fleet began to retreat, the ships lumbering to turn to get back to their main fleet. The Federation ships wasted no time, firing at their engines where the star destroyers had no weapons. The weapons impacted on the engines, some ships ending up exploding as the Federation ensured a costly retreat for the Empire. In all, the Empire lost 130 ships in their assault on the main Federation fleet, where the Federation lost 3 Galaxy classes, 9 Akira classes, 5 Defiant classes, 13 Steamrunner classes, 20 Miranda classes, 9 Sabre classes, 23 Excelsior classes and a single Intrepid class vessel in the brief assault, cutting them down to less than 2/3 of their original force. The Imperials, however, still outnumbered them, as they still had nearly 300 vessels, and started to launch every single TIE fighter in their fleet. This number, massing up to 21,408 TIEs, swarmed together in one massive group, blocking the Imperial fleet from view as the Federation ships began picking them off using their phasers and using torpedoes to get rid of large clusters. Some ships even started to launch their Danube-class runabouts, and the Akiras began to roll out their Peregrine-class attack fighters, all of which possessed shields and warp drive. All in all, the Federation were able to scramble nearly 80 runabouts and more than 1,600 fighters that, while outnumbered, still had shield systems and omnidirectional weapons. They began to attack the Imperial fighters and, while they were outnumbered, they still managed to cut through great swaths of TIE fighters, as their shields and maneuverability protected them from incoming fire. The remaining 20 Defiant classes then joined in the firefight, using their pulse phaser cannons and quantum torpedoes to eliminate large amounts of fighters while they were still trying to turn around to combat the Federation's small craft attack. The use of quantum torpedoes started chain explosions throughout the TIE fleet, as not only were the small, weak fighter consumed by the original explosion, but their debris was sent flying throughout their lines which, while a shielded vessel could easily deal with, caused the unshielded TIEs to explode on contact. With no Federation small craft losses, they were able to eliminate the majority of the TIEs before a single runabout exploded, the TIEs finally managing to take down the shields of a runabout and hit it on the nacelle, the resulting explosion damaging the shields of other runabouts and fighters as the TIEs began to fall back. On the bridge of the Executor, Captain Firmus Pete got back on his feet after Vader used the Force to lift a piece of debris off his body which was preventing him from getting up. As he looked across the bridge, he saw dead officers lying across the room as the dueled trenches at the front of the bridge were rowed with exploded panels and slumped officers as those left alive were trying to clean up after the mysterious yellow torpedo fired by Discovery took out half the ship. Looking out the window, he saw what remained of the Executor as the debris of the other half of the ship floated in front of the slowly drifting Executor as the newly created front of the ship was a mess of torn structural frames, blackened hull plating and frozen crew members. He looked down to his left to find Admiral Ozzel lying on the floor with a piece of shrapnel in his head. The former admiral, who had once been his superior, now lay cold on the floor with lifeless eyes as all his bodily functions steadily died off without life support. He crouched down as he confirmed in his mind that the man who stood over him for years now lay dying on the hard floor. "Ignore him, Captain," stated Vader as he placed a cold mechanical hand on Piet's shoulder. "He was as clumsy as he was stupid. His mistake of bringing us too far away from their forces has led to our current situation." "I know I shouldn't concern for him too much," replied Pete as he got up to face Vader, kicking Ozzel's lifeless body away in the process. "It just seems so odd he had to go at this moment. Regardless of which his decision has led to our disablement," continued Vader. "The main reactor was destroyed in the attack, as well as over half of our turbolasers in our primary hangar bay. Our shields, remaining weapons and hyperdrive remain offline as our backup reactor was damaged in the attack as well." "Do you want me to go down and get them to hurry up?" asked Pete as he began to panic at the thought of his own death at the hands of a superior enemy. "I will command the fleet from up here," answered Vader as he turned to walk to the front of the bridge, Pete trailing behind him. "You're to attempt to get the backup reactor operational so we may still be of some use in this fight. Should you fail, the consequences would be dire for all left on this ship." "Yes, my lord," acknowledged Pete as he began to turn to the door. "Should we come out of this alive, Captain, you will find that we will need someone to replace the incompetent Ozzel," added Vader, turning to face Pete walking out. "It's up to you to get this ship running, Admiral Pete." "Yes, my lord," replied Pete with a heightened attitude. "I will not fail you." Just as Pete walked out of the room, one of the survivors in the trench managed to get a dead officer off the communications panel, looking with bizarrement as it flashed to indicate a ship was hailing them. "My lord, someone is hailing us," he called out as he attempted to focus in on the signal. His face turned to a sigh of relief as he announced, "It's the Death Star. Grand Moff Tarkin is signaling." "Put him on the viewer," ordered Vader as he turned to face the screen at the back, which had survived miraculously intact. The screen turned to static before clearing up to show the face of Wilhuff Tarkin on the bridge of the Death Star. "Lord Vader," he started as he looked to be peering beyond Vader at the damage to the bridge, "has the Federation been giving you trouble?" "I was right to worry about the Discovery," answered Vader. "It fired a single torpedo that somehow managed to penetrate our shields and destroy over half the ship. I have my men currently working to bring the backup reactor online. We've lost the majority of our fighters and about 2/5 of our attack force. It doesn't appear you will need to be in too much of a rush, Lord Vader," overconfidently replied Tarkin. "Nearly their entire fleet went into retreat as soon as the Death Star arrived." "Except for Discovery," interrupted Vader. "It will not be a problem for much longer," stated Tarkin as he looked down at his gloved hands. "The vessel is attempting to evade our fleet by maneuvering through our forces. It will be destroyed though. They can't keep maneuvering around us and expect their fuel to last. Be careful, Tarkin, cautioned Vader. The lives of everyone here and your own count on it. Stand by for further instructions. Coldly replied Tarkin as he looked back up at Vader. Tarkin out.